Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Welcome to the show, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
It's great to chat with you. I got to try some of your delicious chocolates recently, and I'm so excited to talk about what you created, what you're doing today. But I always like to go back to the beginning, talk a little bit about what brought you to France.
Okay. Well, as people may or may not know, officially working professionally in pastry and chocolate is relatively new for me. I was actually a visual and performing arts teacher in international schools. So I was teaching internationally for about 15 years before I came to France. And so I had decided to take a break after my last international teaching post was in Venezuela, which, as some people may or may not know, was a pretty volatile country around 2014 to 16 when I was there. And so I decided to take a pause from teaching and follow my passion and come to Paris to study French pastry at Ferrandi. So I came to France as a student to start my new life. And when I arrived, I hadn't really made any further plans beyond doing the training and see what would happen. And I always kept the possibility open that it would be 1 year. I would do my studies. I would say, great, now I know how to make French pastry, and then go back into teaching internationally. But in the end, as we know, that never happened, and I never left.
I think that happens to a lot of us. We think, oh, we're just going to give ourselves a year, and then life happens.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about some of the similarities between creating in the kitchen and creating in the studio.
Well, I will say that, as much as I had really enjoyed being a working artist, I was a working and showing photographer for many years, concurrent, before, during, and after my career as an arts teacher. I painted, I sketched a lot. But I had discovered very quickly, meaning like while I was finishing my master's in photography, I knew right away, actually, that being a solo artist, being a full-time creative and freelance, and having to sort of pound the pavement and get new gigs all the time, and try to be out there getting other people to value your artwork. It was lonely, and it was also very heavy emotionally, because, as I'm sure you know, when you make art, so much of your soul and yourself goes into it. And it can be really hard, especially when you're young, when someone says, oh, that's not worth it, I'm not buying that. And it just crushes your soul because you've poured everything into your art. And then when people don't value it the same way you do, it's hurtful, right? And so even while I was finishing my arts degree, I decided to go into teaching because I was so passionate since I was 5 or 6 years old about helping other people and sharing my knowledge. And I understood very quickly that I was going to be much happier as a human if I could be in the classroom every day, sharing my love of art and creating things and expressing yourself with young people, as opposed to trying to create in a vacuum and then get other people to value my work. I didn't really, it's going to sound strange, but I almost felt like my personal artwork at the end of the day wasn't terribly relevant, and it could only reach X number of people in a profound and meaningful way. Whereas if I could be working with kids and getting them to create work that was meaningful to them, that would then become meaningful to their families, well, then every year I had 300 or more young people whose passions and interests and creative energy was going out there into the world. And wow, wasn't that fantastic? And that was way more rewarding. And so I would say, for me, it's interesting that you bring it up that way, because I think there is a parallel, because I came here to study French pastry because I wanted to make cakes and I wanted to feed people. And I wanted to make chocolate and I wanted to, make amazing things. But just like with art, there's only so far you can go when you're making food if there isn't somebody to eat it and enjoy it and nourish at the end, at the other end, right? So as much as I love making cakes and selling them to people, what I've found more rewarding has been teaching other people how to do what I do. And so the same sort of double life happened simultaneously in pastry and chocolate, just like it did with the visual arts. And so basically, as soon as I finished my degree at Ferrandi and I was pursuing, you could say, additional training in my chocolate specialty through various conduits, immediately when I started working, I did work as a pastry chef a little bit, but I quickly found that the best way for me to put my talents to good use was to actually go back to teaching, but just teaching pastry and chocolate. And so that's still where I am today. I find that for me, it's just as rewarding, if not more so, to see the delight of a 7-year-old's eyes when they make their first chocolate moulage, or, having an older couple who has gotten bored with themselves come and do a private pastry class with me and see them giggle and enjoy working together in the kitchen and creating something together. And I know that they'll continue to make that when they get home. For me, that's what makes it so rewarding.
So talk a little bit about how you've lived and worked in several countries. How has your international background shaped your creative perspective in the kitchen, being in all these different countries? How has that affected you in the kitchen?
That's a very good question. In a way, it's hard to really say because it's the only experience I have. But I will say, meaning all the places I've lived, all the foods I've eaten, all the pastries I've tried, all the cakes that I've eaten in all the different places I've lived have surely affected my palate and my preferences, right? And I would assume that has given me an advantage over some other pastry chefs or chocolatiers and chocolate makers, because they may have especially in France, right? They may have a much more limited exposure.
Definitely, yeah. And talk about some of the different countries you've lived in.
So first I was in New York, which, a lot of New Yorkers will say New York City is, you like New York City and the rest of the United States, it's like it's a separate country. And a lot of French people and Parisians will say the same about Paris, right? That Paris is its own thing, and then there's the rest of France, and they're very different places. So I count New York City. But then my first international job after that was in southern Taiwan, in Kaohsiung. And so there I really acquired a taste and a love for some of the Asian flavors, which is funny because a lot of the Taiwanese were always surprised that I liked red bean paste and that I would just get so excited about black sesame and desserts. Because at the time, I mean, this was 20 years ago, it really wasn't that fashionable in Western culture to have all these Asian flavors. And so that was wonderful for me. I loved that. And sort of some of the sweet and savory, but also, now that you make me think about it, a lot of Asian and Chinese desserts really aren't that sweet. And I like that. I hate when a dessert is just overpowered by cloying sweetness. And so it really helped, I think, to establish a baseline of like, oh, wow, yes, you can have amazing desserts and quote unquote sweets that aren't actually that sweet, which I think has helped me here because I really do. I do like to reduce the amount of sugar in traditional recipes, and I find a lot of American stuff to be way too sweet, especially because we use a lot of artificial sweeteners and corn syrups and all that. But in France, it's very easy to create wonderful, flavorful desserts and things that don't use a lot of sugar. And then after Taiwan, I was in Argentina and in Buenos Aires. And Argentina, I could say, is the opposite. They really love their sugar. Everything had dulce de leche in it, or marmalade. Even their what they call a croissant. They call it a media luna. Super, super sweet and extra eggy. And even like nappe, how do you say that in English? Like with a sugar glaze even over the top. Delicious, but nothing to do with a French croissant. And I'm trying to think. I wouldn't say necessarily that Argentina brought much to my repertoire in terms of sweets, in terms of desserts and things, beyond a deep and abiding love of dulce de leche, especially in ice cream, and making fantastic alfajores. And then after Argentina, I was in Switzerland. So I was in Zurich for 4 years. And that's where I really started making my own chocolates. And so I was able to befriend and kind of sidle up to a couple of really great chocolatiers and learn a lot about the chocolate making business while I was in Zurich, just because I was into it. And so I started making my own chocolates and experimenting with tempering at home and making my own ganaches and making my own bonbons in Zurich, in Switzerland. And so that was nice. Also because it was the right environment. I don't know how to say that better, just because in order to make chocolate, you kind of need cold and dry environment. And so, making chocolates when I was living in tropical countries would have been too challenging. But in Switzerland, it was a lot easier to manage. And again, the Swiss don't bring much in terms of recipes, right? There's not, I mean, there's a few. There were a few. The Swiss Christmas cookies, like the Anischbrötli and the Brunsli. When I do my Christmas cookie, I do like an international Christmas cookie packet in December. I often include at least one. It's true. I include at least one, if not two, of the Swiss recipes in there. And then I went back to South America. So after Switzerland, I was in Venezuela, in Caracas. And there I had to learn how to be very creative with ingredients because we didn't have them. While I was living there, we had like the locals couldn't afford or have access to pretty much any basic cooking and baking supplies. So like flour, eggs, sugar, rice, vegetable oil, all the basic things you need to bake and to make stuff were very, very hard to get. And if you could get them, they were extremely expensive. We had to go shopping at kind of not really a black market, but I would say it's a gray market. But for example, what I would pay for a pallet of 30 eggs using my American-based salary at the international school, it was the equivalent of 1 month's salary for one of my local counterparts.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that was crazy. And you would go to a restaurant and there might be 20 things on the menu and you'd be like, oh, I'd like to order this dish, please. And they'd say, oh, sorry, no, we can't make that. We don't have mangoes today. Oh, okay. Well, I would like this dish, please. No, sorry. We didn't get any meat this week. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll have this. Can you make this? Okay, sure. And then it comes and it's got like 5 of the ingredients are substituted anyway. And so you learn to be really flexible. And so that was cool. So you learn to sort of reimagine your recipes and what you want to make just based on what's available, because a lot of the time basic ingredients just were not available, or we didn't have running water, or we didn't have electricity, and you just had to find a way around it. But obviously it was in Venezuela that I really had one of the most formative moments of my career shift, because a friend of a friend of a friend turned out to be a cocoa exporter. And so, I was at a party, and one of my colleagues who invited his friend. So I was at Kofi's party, who invited his friend Yuri, and we were chatting in the kitchen. And I was like, "Well, you're not a teacher. What are you doing here?" And he says, "Oh, well, la 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 la." And I actually work. I work in chocolate. I work with cocoa exporters. And I looked at him and I shook his hand and I said, "We will be friends." and and we still are. And so, so Yuri invited me to a dinner with his bosses, a couple who were running a company called Tisano, and so there, when I got to first meet Pat and Joanna, and they're like, "Hey, well, we're going out to the plantations on Tuesday. Do you want to come?" I was like, blah, blah, blah. Yes, of course I want to come. Never mind that I had a job, but I had to maybe call in sick a little bit. And then off I was, up and over the mountains, headed into the jungle on a Tuesday morning in April or May in 2016. And that was a defining moment because, and I don't know if you want to keep this or not.
Yeah.
But it's a story I tell every time. So, I basically was playing hooky from work, and we had to get up super early. It's a 2.5 hour drive over the mountains to get from Caracas to Choroni, which is the sort of port town, which allows you to get in a little boat with just a guy with a stick for a rudder and little engine stuck in the water, in these tiny boats going across the bay. And from Choroni on these little boats, then you get out at the Bay of Chihuahua and you hang out on the beach for a while. And then a truck comes and you hop on the back of the truck with a bunch of farmers. And we're standing up in the back of this truck. And at this point, it's maybe 1:00 in the afternoon. And people are passing around bottles of chicha, which is like a homemade, I don't want to say moonshine, but it's like a local tropical fermented drink of some sort, some random fruity punch tasting thing that had been somebody made at home, and it's poured into reused water bottles. And we're standing in the back of this truck, driving up and over the hills, deep into the rainforest with the canopy above us. And I turned to Yuri and I said, "Yuri, this is incredible. This is just incredible. If you had told me, a year ago or even a week ago that on this particular Tuesday morning, I'd be standing in the back of a truck riding through the rainforest headed to a cocoa plantation, I would have told you were nuts. This is just the most amazing thing." And he looked at me and he said, well, to me, it's just another day at the office. And I looked at him, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I think I need to change my office." And that was the beginning of the end. And I'm pretty sure, I always say that when I got to Paris, I didn't expect to stay. I thought maybe I'd go back to teaching, who knows, yada, yada. But deep down, I think in that moment, back in that truck and heading out to the Chihuahua plantations, I was like, yeah, my life is going to be different from now on. And it has been, and so that first visit out to the plantations, I was actually a guest piggybacking on it was actually the sourcing trip for dandelion chocolate in San Francisco. And so I got to hang out with the sourcers and just tag along and meet the farmers and go out to the, trudge through the fields and pull cocoa pods off of trees. And Patrick took me under his wing and showed me, like, this is a criollo flower and this is how we do the planting and this is how we do the fermenting. And I got to see every step of the process. But because I had already been working with chocolate on my own, they then invited me back actually a couple of times. And we made our own little sort of bean to bar chocolate experiments there in the warehouse. And I got to show the farmers how we transform cacao beans into chocolate and show them what tempering does. And so that was really, really neat. It was really neat. And I always look back on that now that I know the industry a bit better. And I understand how incredibly rare and fortunate it is. Like usually you do all the other stuff first. You do your formal pastry training, you do formal chocolate training, you work in a chocolate shop for a while, you have to maîtriser, all of the craft for a while. And then you save up and you have an opportunity somehow to go and visit a cocoa plantation. And this is after being in the field for 5-10 years. And for me, I got to do that first, which was incredible. And so that really solidified, I think, my desire to eventually specialize in chocolate.
Definitely. And then bring us back to Paris. So now you are creating chocolate, you're creating truffles, you're giving tours. Talk a little bit about some of the biggest misconceptions people have about fine chocolate.
Okay, sure. So yes, so in Paris right now, at this very moment as we speak, my main activity is still with Tarts and Truffles and centers around sharing all of these passions with people. I do hands-on pastry making classes. I've got one in here tomorrow. I do chocolate classes. I've got one on Wednesday, where people can learn to make chocolates and things. And then I also have several experiences that are around chocolate tasting and chocolate and wine pairing. I do have a special experience for families where we do a little bit of everything. They do a little introduction to chocolate tasting. They do a walking tour where they get to experience some other chocolatiers in the neighborhood. And then I take them back to the workshop and they get to make their own things, which is fantastic. But really, ever since I did my full training with the IACCT, which is the International Institute of Chocolate and Cacao Tasting. It's a lot of words, but it's fun to say. It takes a long time to say, but there we go. The IACCT. I finished the course for levels 1 and 2. And so I am a level 2 certified chocolate taster through them. And that was an extremely intense training, which sort of, as cliche as it is, it kind of broke down a lot of what I thought I knew about chocolate. And then it's like, wow, there's so much I didn't know. And a lot of what I thought I knew wasn't actually accurate. And so I've become really passionate about sharing that with people. And so my clients that I have for the walking tours and the 360-degree chocolate experience, the Tour tout chocolat, I try to insert in there as much as I can to help them understand why supermarket chocolate is so terrible for you, and why it's so important to work with, to buy and eat chocolate that has been grown properly without using chemicals in smaller batches by family-owned cooperative farms, that has been fermented in small batches instead of in huge heaps by the side of the road with the truck diesel fumes and everything going by. And that every step of the way, the beans are being taken care of and there isn't extra contaminants or crap or carcinogens that are being introduced into the process. And so in the end, you have this amazing, beautifully crafted chocolate, which is a completely different thing than like even your Lindt bar in the supermarket. It's crap. Like it's made from bad beans that have been over roasted and over processed with a lot of sugar and flavors added and extra cocoa butter to fix the texture. And it's really not what chocolate is supposed to be. So yeah, I guess that's one of the biggest misconception that people have about chocolate is they think that if they pay €1 more and buy a Lindt bar at the supermarket instead of a Nestle dessert, that they're getting better chocolate. And they're really not. I mean, it's still maybe a hair better than Nestle, but it's still terrible chocolate. Most of this, pretty much all the supermarket chocolate that you buy, unless you're in La Grande Épicerie, there's only 3 companies. There's only 3 major companies who are controlling all of the beans, and it's all the same beans that are actually being processed in the same mega factories, and they're just putting them in different molds and putting different wrappers on them, but it's all the same bad chocolate.
Wow. Yeah, that's good information because I love chocolate. So it's good to know these things and talk about some of your favorite chocolate spots in Paris.
Well, my favorite chocolate spots in Paris right now, because it does change, but I love Plaque. They are one of the newer bean to bar chocolate makers in Paris, doing really high quality bean to bar chocolate, and they kind of cracked the code on getting the right balance between really getting excellent beans and an excellent artisanal small batch production methods. But also, Nicola and Sandra, who started it, they came from they came from a luxury market and business background. So they knew pretty well how to how to market it, how to package it, how to create a design that would get the right level of spenders in there. I mean, you can buy a chocolate tablet in there. I think that the cheapest one is probably 11 euros, and maybe the most expensive is 18 or 20. Um, and it is fantastic. And they've also got a great way of sharing the love of good cacao by also having a small cafe space. So they have, you can go and you can have a hot chocolate made with their chocolate. You can have beautiful cacao sorbet. They have some cookies and cakes and things. So I like going to Plaque. I take people there all the time. There's also Ara Chocolate, and she's a little bit more obscure. She's up in the ninth. That's Sabrina. She's also Venezuelan. She's making excellent chocolate from as much as possible using beans from Latin America, but it's a lot harder to get the beans now than it used to be. You have L'Instant Cacao, which is a third bean-to-bar chocolate maker in Paris. There's a lot more than people realize. It's run by my buddy Mark, and that's up in the Palais Royal area. And he's your much more classically French young guy who started his own bean-to-bar chocolate. He got a great location, but he's got a tiny space, so everything happens in one tiny little workshop. And so he's kind of bursting at the seams, but he's still doing everything from making his chocolate to be able to sell tablets from different origins, and also little bonbons and special things at the holidays. Let's see, where else? I like taking clients into Jean-Paul Levin, if we're going to talk about actual chocolatiers. I like to take people I used to like to take people into Marcolini until their shop closed over in the Saint-Honoré district. There's also Patrick Roger, still making excellent bonbons, and his caramels are just to die for. And of course, I appreciate, true to my heart, the double sides of his career, right? Patrick Roger, he was able to sort of develop as a fine art sculptor and actually making these huge life-size sculptures in chocolate and in bronze, while also developing his business and his renown as a chocolatier. And so it's cool that you've got the art galleries and the chocolate shops together. And then, of course, there's my space. Put myself at the end here. Knock on wood. Within, let's say between now and at the latest end of February 2026, I plan to open my own chocolate space. I don't know if you knew that. I'm opening a shop, Crystal. I'm opening a shop.
Amazing. Congratulations.
And so now we get to the 20 minutes in, we get to the meat of the matter. So I'm currently working actually with a business development agency because it was too much to do by myself. But I am creating a new space that Paris does not have yet, with the idea of bringing all of these things under one roof. So my space, which will be called Rencontre Cacao, will have a workshop where people can still come and learn about how to make chocolate, there will even be some bean to bar workshops from time to time. People can come and learn how to make tablets, bonbons, rochers, anything that they're interested in. I mean, not anything, but I'll try to have a variety of different classes available, but only working with high quality craft chocolate. And so that's what's going to really be setting us apart, is that it won't just be like, oh, learn to make some stuff and you go home and it's basically your own version of a supermarket bar. No, which honestly, with pretty much all the places in Paris that offer chocolate workshops right now, you're still working with fairly low quality industrial chocolate couverture, because that's the only way that that's the only way that the chocolate is available in bulk to be able to make, to have enough chocolate to work with, to teach and to unrobe and everything. But my project, I'll be working only with craft chocolate makers, so that when people take something home that they've made in one of my workshops, it'll still be some of the finest quality chocolate in the world that they'll be very excited to eat later. And of course so that's in the works. And the space will also have its own cafe and salon du thé. And so we'll also be using this excellent craft chocolate to make all the pastries, to make all the chocolate chip cookies and the cakes and the entremet and our house chocolate sorbet, and a menu of 7 different origins of hot chocolate. If you want to have drinking chocolate, you can choose your origin and choose the intensity. So people will be able to come and enjoy and experience craft chocolate and all of the flavor potential and all the complexity that is possible in excellent chocolate. They'll be able to taste it in the final product and not just, oh, here, I bought off the shelf this beautiful, 75% women's lot dark chocolate bar from Tanzania, produced in Sweden, and it is some of the best chocolate I've ever eaten, but it's just a chocolate bar, which can be enough for a lot of people. But in our case, people will be able to say, oh, and I had the most amazing chocolate chip cookie I've ever had in my life because it was made with this 75% dark chocolate from Tanzania. And I learned all about the special women's lot cooperative plantation where it's only women controlling the plantation and the cacao harvest. And I can taste the love in the cookie. Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
I
And then,
love
of course,
that. This is so
because it's me,
exciting.
there'll be a little educational
Oh
corner
my
with,
gosh.
books and drawing sheets and a little cozy where people can sit and learn all about chocolate in more traditional ways and little trivia games and stuff like that. And there'll be a retail spot where people can buy tablets and special treats to take home.
Well, that is fantastic. Congratulations. And where can people connect with you and learn more and follow along for booking
for the
tours
time
and
being,
checking out your new shop?
they can follow my current Instagram account, Tarts and Truffles Paris. Well, the account itself is called Tarts and Truffles, with an N, not the word and. And my website, tartsandtruffles.com. But then hopefully, I would say by September, there will be a separate Instagram and website up and running for Rencontre Cacao. But in any case, obviously all of the announcements about the new space and everything will appear on Tarts and Truffles for a long time. And the workshops will still be operated via Tarts and Truffles for a while. So if people get in touch with Tarts and Truffles, join my newsletter on my website, you should be able to hear about the new space as soon as it's ready. And there will be an element of crowdfunding to it. So if any listeners out there are like, wow, this is amazing, I would love to support this venture and be part of the cacao revolution, how can I donate and help make this dream come true and help get those doors open as soon as possible? I will accept anyone's donations because we're going to need it.
Wonderful. I'm so excited for you, and we will share all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for chatting with me today, Lisa. Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.